when Mercedes Lackey and Larry Dixon were in town back in the spring for weeks, and they had come from a convention, I believe, and then they were in town for a week. Larry was a guest on one of the live stream shows.
Oh yes, I remember that.
And brought some wonderful upgrades to the office.
Oh.
And I got to ferry them around to and from the airport. Well, from the hospital. Sorry, that comes later. Foreshadowing, Freudian foreshadowing there. Ferry them from their hotel in Seattle to when they were staying in Tacoma near the studio, and then take them to the airport afterwards. And I will never forget how much luggage they had. Particularly, like, Misty had 2 full writing stations that she brought with her. Not laptops, like full desktop computer setups, monitors, desktops and all. 2 of them, in case one of them went on the fritz.
Oh, wow.
And was carried in these massive, heavy-duty travel plastic, almost like you'd expect from a touring band that their equipment is in there. And it was because she can't not write. Larry was telling me, it's like she has to get her words in every day. And that kind of jives with a couple other things he's told me. It's like, writers, there's no real difference between a weekday and a weekend, except that there are more people in your house on the weekend. And it's harder to get work done. And I'm finding that there's no real day off, because you know the only office you work in, if you're working on your own, is yourself. And you got to provide your own pressure and timeline. And so and the reason I bring that story up is I was thinking about it this week, because Camille has been in the hospital. It's her major surgery as part of her journey this year, and I brought along the laptop and was able to get some work done in the time that I otherwise would have just been sitting in the lobby and fretting. Get your words in. Yeah. And so did that. Averaged a couple thousand a day. None today, though.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But I'm kind of getting, there are no real days off. But it's not like a work day has to be 8 to 9 hours of grind. There, the productive time of day may only be an hour or two. And if it happens during the same time of day, you want to visit while the portal is open,
right,
as it were, because it helps build momentum. It continues sort of the chain of days that you're working, and it just makes it easier and makes it more routine. So I was a bit proud of myself for getting that done. Have not been sleeping very well, mainly because I've been sleeping bedside in a hospital for the last couple of days, which as far as listen, the UW Medical Center, world-class hospital, wonderful surgeons and nurses, excellent care team. It's in the top 10 or top 15 for multiple categories, like nationwide. As a hotel, it's shit. There was no shower. I slept on like a fold-out chair thing, and then a futon. She had a better time of it, of course. She got a nice little electric bed with the setup with the auto release of pain meds.
Oh yeah,
which only once she mistook for the TV clicker and was like, why isn't the TV? Wow. I'm joking, of course. There was a 6-minute delay on it, but it was all right. So for the last since Tuesday night, it's Saturday now, I haven't slept more than 2 hours straight, because the nurse and the care teams would come in after the first night every hour to check in on her, and even last night was every 2 hours. So it was almost like sleeping with a newborn in the house again. Except I didn't get to go back to my own bed afterwards. So if I'm a bit loopy and I don't make much sense and I make a Freudian slip in my opening monologue, that's why.
All right, I will file that away under reasons Matt says things.
Yes. Hi, welcome to Coddiwomple. I'm Matt Vancil.
I'm Nathan Rice.
And this is the podcast where we meander gradually, yet purposefully, towards a vague destination.
That's right.
So what have you been working on? Is there anything you want to plug these days? We haven't seen you for a couple.
No.
Well, or heard, I should say, for the last couple of podcasts. Camille hosted the one from, let's see, what is it now? This is September, so July, and Wesley hosted last month. So oddly enough, you're the only co-host who I haven't seen naked. I lie, of course.
Yeah, that's true. You've seen us all. No, I have I think the other podcast back in June was about when I got my new position with my current employer. Long story short, I've been really busy with that. It's a drive up to Redmond, so it's somewhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours up every day, and that was just during the summer. Now that school started,
Oh no.
yeah, no, what was it, Tuesday, my total commute up and back was 5 hours.
And it especially sucks because there's no real
Alternate?
there's no public transportation route either.
That's
won't
terribly more efficient than, it's
Right,
like
like-
about equal at best.
You can take the train from Tacoma to Seattle, no problem, but to get to the east side
Yeah.
requires transfers.
Yeah.
It's like you can be 2 to 2.5 hours to try to bus from Tacoma to Redmond.
Right, which is the same as being like, well, why don't I just choose my own schedule? I mean, I guess I save some time and get to do more things on the bus, but I also don't get to decide when I come back.
That's true.
So yeah, that's why I've been missing and done almost nothing. The gaming for hire and potential streaming show with that are on the back burner until I have a life again. But they are still simmering in the background. So, how about you? What have you been up to besides a lot of visits to hospitals and driving other authors around?
Well, we're still getting situated in the new house.
And it's very nice, I can say,
you.
since I'm in it and seeing it right now.
We like it. It's reached that point. We're reached that point of unpacked, where every room still has a little cache of boxes and random stuff that will be there for years,
Right.
because we can't be bothered to put it away. We found all of our clothes and electronics. The books are in the shelves. The sheets are on the
Yeah.
beds. I don't know. Here's a box that we've been carrying around that has not had its tape broken for 3 moves anyway, but that we're not going to throw out yet.
Right.
Because
Because maybe you'll want the stuff inside.
we
somewhere.
might want it. Now it's all mementos,
Right.
because we haven't touched it for so long.
Right, yeah.
So there's that. The kids are back in school, which is nice, and I can put a little more time into the writing. And on the Farther All World the Farther All World Bible, World Bide. I tried to say guide and Bible at the same time.
World Biden?
I've been biding my time
Yeah.
on this. The end is finally in sight.
Ah.
I have finished up with the lore rewards. And when I say that the end, I mean the end of the rough draft.
Oh, okay.
There's still the the rewrite I need to do, and then probably a hard copy edit before I submit it to Zoe for copy editing and art and all that such.
Okay.
But it is in sight. I've only got a couple of sections left, and of them, none of them are heavy, hard writes anymore. The lore rewards for the backers are all done. I've got a section on different organizations that certain peoples have. Like put a tiny little word right up on the Wizardium and the Bard's College.
Oh, okay.
A couple of sample Elvish houses and some Dwarven hearths. And then there's the section on epics, which I've been taking notes in as I've been going.
Okay.
And I need to round out the glossary, because it's not going to have I'm not going to redraw the map because I'm tired and old and lazy, but I am going to fill out every little piece on it and send in a clean map and then a version of the map with numbers on it corresponding to a list of write-ups.
Oh, okay.
So here's where this is stuff, and even including stuff in the Here Be Dragons sections of the map, because we're talking about other continents and
Right.
other places in the world. So that's finally, the end on that is in sight, which is grand, because I've been working on that pretty much primarily since February.
Okay. So you've got a bigger world than just what we're focusing on at Farther All there.
Yes. So to put it in perspective, a feature screenplay, say 100 pages, is about 20,000 words.
Right.
My first novel which is technically a novelette,
Okay.
was 50,000 words.
Okay.
The last novel, the Hop Jockey, The Stray and the Hole in the Stars, was 90,000 words.
Okay.
The Farther All World Bible is currently 227,000 words, and I'm not done yet.
All right.
The history section alone is longer than my last novel.
All right.
So I seem to be over the narrative agoraphobia that I had first going into prose writing a few years back. So that's going to be nice to be done because I've got some other it'd be nice to get back to the novel and get back to the adaptation and start thinking about future projects or new things. I'm also working on a little side thing called Good Night Alt-Right.
Is that a children's book?
It is, yes. And it came out of a... so Claire Alameda, who is the makeup designer, head of makeup on a number of Zoe projects. She was on Journey Quest 3, 3.5, and on 4. Made this post on just sort of how badly the Proud Boys and the alt-right embarrassed themselves in their last, march on Portland, where they had the cops had to open up a bridge for them to escape from the Antifa Black Bloc, and people dancing in unicorn outfits and as clowns, deliberately positioning themselves in the background of the Proud Boys videos. So if they tried to use these to show how badass they were, there's a dancing turd emoji in the background.
That's awesome.
It's really great. And she posted, Good Night Alt-Right, and an artist, a link to that on Facebook. And an artist friend of hers said, if this is a children's book, I will illustrate it for you. And then I wrote a couple of rhyming couplets in it, and people were like, yes, go. So that
so
might
now
be a
you're
thing.
making a children's book.
I've got a few down. It is surprisingly difficult to write something that short.
I believe it.
Because the question is, are we going for a straight parody of Goodnight Moon? Because it doesn't rhyme, it doesn't match the syllable structure of it. But you've got a children's book there that is recognizable by 70 years worth of kids and parents.
Right.
So maybe we try to parallel the structure in the beginning, and then give yourself a little free form so you can fit in all the
things you
all
have
the
to...
organizations you need to tar.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I find myself remembering a couple of interviews with Weird Al.
Oh yeah.
Because he was saying, it's actually really difficult to do what he does, where he both matches, he parodies the music, but also
matches the rhyme structure.
And he said the one artist he wasn't able to do that with was Eminem. He said either I could match the rhyme structure and have something that made absolutely no sense, or I had to deviate from the rhyme structure and able to tell a coherent parody song, but I could not do both.
Yeah, I think I remember having this conversation with you before, not on the podcast, but yeah.
Fascinating bit. Yes, comedy takes effort.
It turns out.
Yeah, it's not, there are a few comedy sorcerers like the improv teams and whatnot. Then there are the comedy wizards who
have to memorize
way
the
too much time indoors and pore over ancient texts, the writings of Red Fox and so on. Which actually sounds like a wizard character there. So that's neat. So that's what I've been working on as well. Given all your heavy work and commute time, do you have the time to read anything these days? What are you reading now?
Not as much. Much like before, my reading is called podcast still, because I have multiple hours of that a day I get in.
That counts.
I'm still listening to some of the stuff I'd been listening to before. Radiolab is still a big favorite of mine. I've started some more like a 1A, get my NPR in, and on the NPR I'm also getting in Invisibilia and Hidden Brain, which are both kind of cool.
I've heard Hidden Brain. That's with, I can't remember his name, but I
believe it. The last name I believe is Shankar.
Oh yes, Shankar. Yeah. What is it? And I think I've heard a couple of his, or I've read a couple of the articles that were transcribed from the podcast.
Yeah, it's basically about like different things about how our brains trick us or how our brains work, or just kind of different things like that. So
cool.
That one's kind of fun. Invisibilia is sort of about, like they say, the tagline is it's something about like the invisible forces that shape our world or us and things like that. It's kind of interesting.
What
I like that one.
What type of invisible forces? Do we mean just things that we don't take into consideration, or are we talking, gravity, electromagnetic fields?
No, yeah, more along the lines of things that we don't take into consideration. Let me see if I can pull up a
I could just edit this time out,
You could edit this time out, but why would you do that? Why don't we let people hear the phone search I'm making so that I can find an example of an episode right now to tell you something about it? Except apparently, right now, I can't operate my phone.
This would be the exact reason to edit this section.
No, but this is really interesting for our audience. I'm telling you, this is exactly what they want. Yep. Yeah, we'll edit this part out. So the other thing I'm doing is where I am reading. I can read it in like little bite-sized pieces as I'm going through the Pathfinder 2nd Edition core rulebook. It's the kind of reading I can do is when I can be like, I'll read the section on the Ranger. Time to go.
How do you find it?
It's interesting. I would want to, I think, play it to try it in practice.
Okay.
They're definitely trying to make something new that keeps the elements of the old that people like while still not just making, they were basically edition 3.75
So
as
is
Pathfinder.
this-
So
is
this
this
is not
3.825?
3.825. Yeah, they're trying to make like a brand new thing.
Okay.
It's not 4th or 5th edition of D&D. That still is very recognizable for what it is. I'd say it's sort of like parts of 4th and 5th edition like influenced it. It's also more complex in tracking what happens when as you progress through levels. Like you have your class feats that are specific to your class, and then you also have skill feats that are basically how you advance your skills, and then you have your general feats, which are just whatever they happen to be, and then you also have your racial or / heritage feats.
Okay.
And so like they're all on these 4 different progressions about when you get these new things. And, how you combine those determines what pool you choose from, but they're all on different schedules for when they happen.
I see.
So I'm fine with a crunchy system. I can usually track that kind of stuff. I don't know how easy it's going to be for folks who don't have a lot of roleplay experience to jump into that particular system.
Well, if they're starting at first level, then I imagine you can kind of
Yeah.
ease yourself into it.
Yeah. Just for long term, like, wait, what am I doing? How am I going to plan this out? Like, yeah.
The thing I always appreciated about Pathfinder was that it had those that range of options within the core classes, which encouraged
Yes.
people to stick with their core classes rather than becoming these weird pastiches of cobbled together prestige classes that
Right.
just don't make any sort of narrative sense.
They've kind of tried to find a way to do that with this one in making like the class specific feats so that you can sort of choose like different branches of like feat paths or just kind of do a modge podge of different things so that you can kind of have the class work the way you want it while still having certain things that are common to everyone who takes it. So
Okay.
But yeah, I'm interested to try it out, and it's one of the things I've been having bite-sized pieces of actual reading with my eyeballs, as opposed to with my earballs.
Your earballs?
My earballs. Those are the things that you listen with.
So,
What have you been reading, Matt?
I have not been reading much, actually. Haven't had the time really to sit back and get into stuff. Partially because a couple of weeks ago we were on our family vacation, and it was less of a relaxing vacation that time. I don't know if it's just because the kids are older, or we knew that the surgery was coming up, or we were still at the time we hadn't sold our house. Our house sold while we were on vacation, which is pretty sweet. But now that we're back, I am reading a book I tried to get into, and I mentioned I think a couple of shows ago, The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley, who is the novelist and essayist best known for Brave New World, about his account of experiencing an altered state of consciousness on mescaline in the 1950s. In the era, and I heard about this book when I read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, about the history of psychedelics and LSD in particular.
Yeah.
Because when it came out, these weren't illegal substances.
Right.
They were made class 1, forbidden drugs, even though at the time they unlike things like cocaine and meth and heroin, do not lead to death by themselves. Someone might have a bad trip and run out into traffic, but it's not the the LSD that
it's not the
melted their brain or
my
anything.
heart stopped working because of the LSD.
Exactly. And just an accounting of his experience, and I'm about halfway through it, and it's fascinating because not only is Huxley a great wordsmith, but he was incredibly well read of the philosophers of the time. So he's relating this to, the theories on memory by a French philosopher named Henri Bergson.
Okay.
Who, I don't know if you read in your...
I've heard of. I did not read any of his works.
And relating to this concept that Bergson postulated of the mind at large, which is that what if our brains are capable of perceiving, or the entities within us capable of perceiving everything happening around us in the universe, but the animal in which we are contained cannot process all that. And based on Huxley's own observations, when you are in that state, you do have your vocal faculties. You can speak, you can think. That's not slowed down at all. But your motivation to do anything is just completely wiped away. I want to sit here and I want to study the infinite complexity that are the pleats in my corduroys. That sort of thing. I want to stare at this print of a Cezanne and look at the embroidery in the character's dress, and that's all I want to do. And so what he's writing about Bergson's theory was that the animal within us, the brain is not additive so much as it is reductive. That the brain and the ego create a reducing valve of sorts to throttle the amount of input that's coming in down to what would keep us physically and socially alive.
So that we don't get too wrapped up in all the stuff going on
everything,
around
right?
us.
It's like the limit of your perceptions is, what do I need to function in this environment?
Bring it down to a less fascinating level.
Exactly. And that what mescaline and some of the other drugs are doing, ayahuasca or the one, the South American one, I think he mentions, is it releases the tension on that valve a bit, and it lets more in.
Interesting.
And it is interesting. I'm looking forward to reading a bit more because he wrote a couple of other related pieces after this called Heaven and Hell and also The Divine Within. So I'm curious about what one of the foremost men of letters of the last century has to say about this. So what are you watching these days?
That's actually something I've been able to do more of because after a giant long day of working commuting, sitting down and watching TV is something that both Hannah and I are interested in doing and I have the energy for.
Makes sense to me.
So let's see. We burned through Carnival Row when it came out just a few weeks ago.
Now this is on Amazon.
It's
Prime?
on Amazon Prime. It's the alternate world where fey creatures are alive and they had their own continent and then with Orlando Bloom and Chloe D something. Yeah, Cara Delevingne
Cara Delevingne
or Delevingne, I think.
Yes.
Anyway, but yes, that's it. And the premise is that humans then went over and kind of invaded their lands, and now they're
so not based on any historical precedent.
No, not at all. And then it all takes place around this city called the Burg, where it's a human city, but a ton of fae are living there, and then it's about what happens there with the inhabitants there following certain people like Orlando Bloom, and it's got some very obvious parallels and comments about prejudice and stuff like that in society.
Is it an alternate version of Earth, or is it its own planet?
It's not clear exactly. The Burg is not necessarily any specific human city. If any place, it's London from an appropriately equivalent time period.
Okay.
But I mean, it's basically just a setting for humans and fae to have a place to get together without high technology.
Did they wrap it up in one season, or are they?
No, it's specifically it's meant to have more seasons. So
how did you find it?
I liked it. There were parts that I didn't necessarily jump right on and follow along with, but for the most part, I liked it. A lot of good actors are in it. It's got Jared Harris also. I love him. Yeah, it's got Indira Varma. She's great in it, and just a lot of a lot of other. You'd recognize Jared Harris if you saw him. He's been in everything. I really enjoyed that. I'm also finishing up the third season of Legion.
Now, you've mentioned that one to me before.
It is right now the best thing being made on television.
Really?
Yeah. For sure. It is absolutely like just the writing, the acting, the style of the whole thing. Like there's like whoever wrote the World Bible for that show had a very specific vision for how this should play out and look, but still giving people a lot of room to work within that. And like, but it's oh god, I can't describe how cool it is until you have to see it for yourself.
You're not the first person to recommend that to me, nor the first person whose taste and recommendations I take very seriously to recommend that to me. So I'll have to check it out. Now, this is based on the character of Legion from the X comics? Yes,
although you don't need to know a damn thing about Marvel to enjoy this show. It's very... the most cursory search on the internet will tell you that the character of Legion is the son of Professor X, which, at least currently, I'm not done with the third season, but has very little... Like, no one ever says Charles Xavier as of yet.
Okay.
Like, at all. You just, if you happen to know Marvel lore, you know that that's the case.
Okay.
And there are references to his dad.
Is this akin to one of the DC Universe prequel shows?
No, I don't think. It's basically its own thing. It's really not meant to mix with any of the other stuff in any way, shape, or form. It's definitely its own thing.
I do like a self-contained story.
Yeah. There. And then the other one is The Boys.
How is that?
It is delightfully dark and terrible.
Terrible as in poorly made?
No, it's so good.
Oh.
It is this... I mean, the idea is there are superheroes and that there's this big company that sort of runs basically the equivalent of the Justice League of America. Mm-hmm. And superheroes are constantly trying to audition to be one of those big superheroes run by this company and part of like the big team.
You join the Premier League.
Yeah, I think it's called the Seven, if I recall correctly. Which it's because there are like 6 of them, I think. Okay. Anyway,
between 6 and 8 of them.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how many. But no, it's like some of the people in the show are just these terrible people. And they do a really good job of also giving them these very human moments despite their awful flaws and the terrible people they are. Like
these are the heroes themselves?
The heroes, the villains, the everything.
Okay.
Like, and there's not a lot of difference sometimes between the two.
See, I've always liked that as a concept in superherodom, is that, I mean, you have effectively got in superheroes the equivalent of demigods from like classical literature. Yeah. And the thing is, demigods weren't good people a lot of the time. No. I mean, some of them did. They did incredible, remarkable things. Yeah. But they were as often evil or chaotic or destructive as they were, heroic there. So it's nice to... Yeah, that's got some appeal to it.
I recommend it. I mean, but go in knowing like it is dark and violent.
Okay.
But so good. So good. I enjoyed the crap out of that one.
I'll have to check that out. Good recommendations. Thank you.
How about you, Matt? You been watching anything?
Yeah, I had been watching Star Trek Voyager. I stalled a bit going into the second season, and not because of anything on Voyager's quality on that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been enjoying it. What I like about it is, it's like the previous 2 shows, like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. You've got the sort of neophyte, genius, befuddled character there who doesn't understand people. You had Data before, you had Odo now, and then you had the Doctor, who is, I think, my favorite character on the show there. Robert Picardo is a national treasure. And it was nice to finally see an actual new character in Harry Wang. Yeah. In that, Wesley Crusher was a new character. Yeah. But doesn't really count because he was a genius and he was a ship brat. Like he got a lot of advantages there. He went to serving on the flagship of the fleet for a while. And then Dr. Bashir in DS9, who was just out of the academy as well, was also, a hyper genius, and then later revealed actually genetically enhanced superhuman.
Right.
So with Harry, it was Harry Kim. I said Harry Wang. Oh boy, Garrett Wang. That was the name of the actor.
Oh, there you go.
Harry Kim. Thank you. With Harry Kim, is like, here's a guy who is fresh out of the academy and. That's
not a
it.
super genius.
Not necessarily just
good at his job, but not
really hyper competent. But you actually get to see sort of a neophyte in there, which is cool. I enjoyed it, but what dropped it off for me was I watched the Deep Space Nine documentary that came out last year that was funded on Indiegogo, What We Left Behind, which was, I was not emotionally ready to watch it.
Really?
It was so marvelous because it's not just a retrospective on the show, which it was. It didn't just have interviews with the cast and crew members, which it did. What Ira Stephen Bear did was he reconvened the writer's room with Renee Echevarria, who did the 4400, with Ronald D. Moore, who went on to do Battlestar Galactica, and some of the other guys, and they broke down the pilot of a season 8, what it would be 20 years later, including animated storyboards that accompanied it. Like, here's how we would pick it up if we were to take into account everyone's age now that it's 20 years later.
Right.
And
that would be...
And it begins with Nog
and everyone wanted to see it,
It begins as Nog as Captain of the Defiant. Right?
Oh.
Deep Space Nine is still there. Kira is in charge, but now she's a Vedic. Because she's gone the religious route in there. Jake is the novelist who he was going to be, and there's more of a Bajoran presence on the station now. It's just, you get to see all the other characters. Like Esri is now a captain of her own ship with her husband, Dr. Bashir. Worf is, he's still in the house of Martok, but Martok is aging as Chancellor. And wants him to take over, and the question is, of course, when or will Sisko ever come back, and they answer that question. Other things in it were like it opens with Max Grodenchik, I think is how you pronounce his name, who played Rom. Singing in a tuxedo, very much like Vic Fontaine. The memories of the show. And they talk about how the show was always considered the ugly middle child between the Voyage shows of Next Generation and Voyager, and how it's become, discovered later on, the benchmark of Star Trek. And I also learned that I had been pronouncing the name of one of my favorite characters and one of my middle school and high school crushes wrong for 25 years.
What's it?
It's Nana Visitor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I watched that, and you see the family in it. And then at the end, you have 4 fellas in tuxedos singing over the credits. And in the credits, there's a point where Nana comes out and says to Ira, wait a minute, what about all this other stuff we didn't go over? And apparently there is a ton of additional material, because they had to edit it down to feature documentary length that would be on the Blu-ray or the DVD. So I'm all about one.
So buy the Blu-ray or DVD.
They had the fella Andrew something, I can't remember the last name at the moment, but who played Garak.
Oh God, I love
speaking
that character.
In character again. It was so good, and confirming something that long speculated, that at the beginning, what was it that Garak wanted from Bashir? Why did he pursue him? Was it the intelligence angle there? And they confirmed, no, at the beginning he just wanted to fuck him.
That's funny.
That they confirmed, oh yeah, Garak's gay. He's always been gay.
That's great.
And you don't see, and then of course it developed into an actual friendship and went up beyond that. But it was, they were talking also with Mark Alimo and Jeffrey Combs.
Oh, okay, yeah.
About how, at the beginning of the show, when it was first going on, everyone's favorite Cardassian character was Gul Dukat.
He's the best.
He's
Gul
fantastic.
Dukat is awesome. What a great villain.
But since then, the show's been off the air, everyone's favorite Cardassian is Garak, and I'm of that. I'm on Team Garak myself.
Oh no, I mean, I like Garak for who's your favorite Cardassian, but Ducat was a great villain.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
oh,
to
fantastic
the end.
villain, fantastic.
I guess
villain.
you couldn't bring him back, probably.
No, and they actually talked to Alimo about this, about how when acting with Avery Brooks, they wouldn't give each other anything because they were both so trying to win the scene so much.
Yeah.
Because the rivalry between the characters was so intense. They talked
so
about,
like the actors wouldn't give because
well, no, the actors would, but it's like it's this constant competition between them.
Yeah.
And there's a whole fantastic bit about Brooks's directing style because he wound up directing so many of those episodes.
Really?
Well. Oh yeah.
Specifically those between Ducat and.
Not necessarily those, but his style as a director, what they said was he's like a jazz musician, right? Like apparently one time, so the guy Casey Briggs, I think, who played Damar.
Oh yeah.
He says they interviewed him as well. He's saying so the first episode where I had a real monologue in it. I'm kind of stumbling. It's one that Avery's directing, and I'm kind of stumbling through it. I'm forgetting lines and whatnot. And after the cut, he just pulls me aside and he just says, "Glide." And
that was
goes
it?
back. That was it. Like, just kind of, take your time, move from one thing to the next. And Jeffrey Combs said it was similar to me. He just told me slalom. Here and there. Like, it's just, you got to, if you want to understand Avery, you got to think of him in terms of free-flowing jazz. There. And in the clips where you see Avery, that's how he speaks.
Yeah.
Is in this clipped, gliding, slaloming, jazz kind of tone. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. There was another, and the stories, apparently anytime they did a Ferengi episode, Armin Shimmerman would have all the actors, anyone who was appearing as a Ferengi, over to his house. So they could go over the stuff and basically get the new ones used to the idea of, so you're going to be wearing a little bit of makeup. And you got to talk around, and they get the teeth ahead of time so they could pronounce that. And they tell this one story where Quark and Rom, the actors, he's been in makeup for hours, and then they get on set and they're looking at each other and like, oh crap, that's my face. Like they had some substitute makeup people for the day because every every Ferengi had their own dedicated makeup artist, right? And they had a sub for the day, and they didn't get the foreheads wrong, but the noses were wrong.
Oh no!
And apparently the AD saw this and said, "You go back to makeup, and I want your right faces on in 10 minutes or something." Something like that, and which is very AD. And there was one bit they talked to Michael Dorn as well.
Because he had to do a lot of makeup.
Oh yeah, and his favorite thing was he says Colm Meaney was the worst. He would come in for his 10 minutes of makeup and just bitch the whole time. Meanwhile, Michael Dorn's sitting there still. He's been there since 4 a.m. He says that his favorite moment was the time that they had that episode where Sisko and Odo and O'Brien all surgically were altered to look like Klingons for an undercover mission, so they all had to go through it as well. That was great. And apparently, Auberginois, I think that's how you pronounce his name? Rene Auberginois?
Auberginois is how I always pronounced it, but I am not going to claim that is correct.
The Odo makeup was actually really, really uncomfortable. And whatnot. And there was one, and Ira was told the story that at the end of one episode of season 6, when they wrapped Odo out, and he reaches down and he tore his face off and like threw it at Ira, like, this is a symbol of my pain. Hold on to this. And Bear framed it. Like he's got it in his home.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the actors had a good laugh about that. That was really cool. And after seeing that, after hearing so much of the back of what was happening behind the scenes, and who directed which episode, and the family familiarity and camaraderie and such that was there, the interest in going back to an episodic based story like Voyager just kind of dissolved.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was fantastic. I loved it. As for other things I'm watching, Camille and I have been looking for shows to watch together a lot, and there's not much that we agree on now that Game of Thrones is over, and which left a bad taste in our mouths.
Yeah.
We've been watching a lot of Queer Eye recently, and which is it's nice to have a show that always leaves me feeling good, like makes the soul smile a bit. and that's one of them. And then we also started Barry, which does the opposite.
It always makes you feel a little dirtier.
Well, it's funny. It's an actual dark comedy that gets the dark comedy right.
Okay.
We saw the first couple of episodes before we went up to the hospital for surgery, and it's pretty funny. And it is another movie, a Hollywood show about Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
The basic premise there is Barry, Bill Hader's character, is a hitman from the Midwest who's close to being burned out, and he doesn't want to do this anymore. And his handler hires him to go out to L.A. To off this guy for the Chechen mob. And while tracking the guy, he accidentally stumbles into the guy's acting class full of bad actors, being trained by Gene, played by Harry Winkler.
Oh, okay.
Which is fantastic. And then he gets applause for the first time in his life.
Okay.
And he feels that maybe this is the thing that I can do.
That's funny.
Yeah. And we've only seen a couple episodes, but it's really promising and has been a lot of fun so far. And I look forward to watching the rest of it. I think they just finished their second season. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And if you've seen...
That's one I've heard is good and that I've been looking to start.
Hader, his impressions are incredible.
Really?
Oh, yes. I think that's how he got his start, was as an impressionist. And I've seen a couple of clips where people have done the deep fake editing, where you put one person's face over someone else. So when he's on, I think it was Conan, and he does a Tom Cruise impression, he morphs into Tom Cruise for the duration of the impression, and it is unnerving.
Wow.
And then he slips out of it, and he slips into Seth Rogen, and he's Seth Rogen for a moment, and it's a thing, but he's quite good at that. So what are you playing, if anything?
Where I can, I'm playing Legend of the Five Rings still. Tends to be Sundays, sometimes Mondays if I can fit it in.
Where do you play, or with whom?
Mostly at Terra Crux or Game Matrix here in Tacoma. Although 2 Saturdays ago, I went up to Dreamstrands up in North Seattle for a tournament, which was a lot of fun.
How'd you do?
I did all right. There was a tournament the weekend before that down here, which was the first L5R tournament I ever won.
Really?
Yes, it was very small.
Still, congratulations, man.
I was like, oh, well, I'm not as terrible at this game as I could be.
All honor to the crane.
Yeah, that's right. Let's see. Thursdays I'm still playing D&D where I can, and then when I'm at home and it's just me, I'm playing a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2 because someone loaned it to me, and I'm usually 6 months to a full year behind current video games.
Very, very similar here with the behind. I'm a couple years behind in video games, which is fine. They're new to me.
Yeah, no, it's a ton of fun. I enjoy it.
I haven't been playing Magic, but I have been following the spoiler releases of the new Magic set, Throne of Eldraine, which is just a fun way to sort of, enjoy the art style and the story without investing hundreds of dollars into it. This Throne of Eldraine set is actually pretty cute. It seems to be based on fairy tales. Like there's a lot of fairy tale characters you would recognize, though those names aren't out there. For example, there's a green card called Flaxen Intruder. It's basically by the art Goldilocks with a smirk and a sword.
Okay.
And there's a white card called Giant Killer, which is a guy chopping down a beanstalk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can kind of guess who that is. There's a card that lets you summon 3 pigs, and there's a glass slipper.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Each color has an order of knights and paladins associated with it. So there's a bit of an Arthurian thing into that too. There's a Lady of the Loch in this set. So I don't know because I haven't read the lore into it, but my guess would be this is the actual world where a lot of our fairy tales come from.
Oh, okay.
So here's the unadulterated, non-sanitized child version of some of these stories. And what's especially neat about it is they have a new mechanic called an adventure. Some of the creature cards, their text box is split so that it looks like an open book. Pardon me. And on the right side are any traits that the character has. Okay. And on the left side is a mini spell that you seem to be able to cast once they're in play.
Okay.
And some of them are neat and thematic. Like there's the Goldilocks one. I think you can pay a bunch of mana to destroy her and bring in 3 bears. Or something. So that's funny. It's fun and it's neat to follow along, and I appreciate the design. It's the flagship game in the TCG industry. The art is second to none. But what I've actually been playing is on the Switch is a game called Hyrule Warriors. So this is a game by the same people who made the Dynasty Warriors games.
Oh, okay.
Which were famous, and I loved those games
Yeah.
when they were on the PlayStation.
I remember you introduced me to those.
So if you're unfamiliar with the Dynasty Warriors games, it's a series of games. Basically, they kept making the same game over and over again, just better and better. That was set during the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, in China, where you had 3 different factions vying to basically with one another to rule China and become the first emperor. You know, there was the Wei faction with Cao Cao, the general, and then I forget. And you could play as all the different heroes depending on faction, Guan Yu and Zhuge Liang and some of the others. And every time you'd fight these battles that were pivotal moments in Chinese history, and they could go one way or another. And then when you beat the game as so and so, you could unlock new heroes that you could play. And what was really cool about it was, you had your own unit of guys who would follow you. And you were one of a dozen or more different divisions on this battle map.
Yeah,
and your division would engage other divisions and fight hundreds at a time.
You could tell your guys to go, hey, go do that while I take care of
you
this
guys over
there,
here
on this side.
You see the other unit's commander, and you challenge him to single combat, and you defeat them, and then your side cheers, and their morale goes up. But then sometimes you may be doing really great, and you get a message that comes up and is like, we're being attacked on the right flank, help us. And if it falls, then you are in danger of losing the battle. So maybe you zoom over there and help them out. And what was neat about it is it wasn't realistic history by any means, but it was that sort of within the margin of errors that Wirefu is. You know, it's like no one's throwing fireballs or summoning demons or anything like that. They're doing these ridiculous moves with their weapons, and that's fun. So they've taken that basic idea and mapped it into the Zelda mythology.
That's kind of fun.
But what's great about this is they fully embrace that it's a fantasy world.
Oh, okay.
So there are wizards and ghosts and things, and when the bad guys summon a boss like dragon-like creature, it is a massive thing that is throwing your guys left and right, storming through gates, blasting stuff up, and it's like an actual fantasy battle, and it's really a lot of fun in it. And the other difference in this game is, in the Dynasty Warriors games, if you pick your Zhuge Liang, you are Zhuge Liang for that entire battle.
Right.
In the Zelda mythos of games, you can flip between the different characters as you're going. So, like if I can play Link over here, then flip over to Impa, flip over to Sheik, depending on where they are in different stages of the battle. I'm stuck on a current level right now that's beaten me a few times, but I figure I'll get through it eventually. So that's been fun. There is something, because the previous games I've been playing have been Breath of the Wild, which is tough, actually.
That's what I've heard.
It's quite difficult. There is something nice about being able to just wade effortlessly through hundreds of chodes.
Yes.
Left and right, smack, blam, kaboom.
Sometimes you just want to kill a whole bunch of people.
Knock out.
Oh, yes.
As I tell Wesley, of course. Wow, you killed them, Daddy? No, they're KO'd, see? You KO'd 1,000 people, Daddy!
Yes, I did,
yes,
son.
I did, son. Yes, I did.
Remember to tell this tale when I have passed on and your own children ask you, what was your daddy like? Well, he KO'd thousands of people in Hyrule.
Until he was slain by carpal tunnel syndrome.
Never forget.
Never forget.
All right, well, we got some questions here.
We have quite a few questions, it looks like. Wow, we have
From
2 pages of questions.
Rom McLennan.
I believe that's Rob McLennan.
I think you maybe were thinking of...
Oh, no, that's Rom McLennan.
It's what you have written, yeah.
In keeping with Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine. So the question is, what do you consider to be the hallmarks or characteristics of a good villain?
By good villain, I presume you mean good antagonist. Well, not necessarily. Villain, to me, means more like a bad guy who isn't paired with any one particular hero. Whereas an antagonist is someone paired usually against a protagonist. Okay. Right? If that makes sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So, like, Magneto is a villain, but he's the villain for all of the X-Men there.
You could argue he's the antagonist of Professor X.
You could. Yes, and that would be a very good argument. But for the sake of a good antagonist, good villain... they have to exceed the protagonists or the heroes in every way. They've got to be stronger. They've got to be better equipped. They've got to have more complete knowledge, better connections. They've got to, and they need that because if at any point the heroes are not punching up, it ceases to be heroic. And this is the issue I have with a lot of the DC Universe movies, is that in order to find someone who is a credible threat to Superman,
Right.
you just got to get so ridiculously powerful that it just feels like too much of a stretch. That's my take on it. So back on the hallmarks of a good villain or a good antagonist. On top of exceeding the character in every way, so that the characters really are, or your protagonist or your characters are underdogs, is that the worst villains are the ones that are cartoonish in their evil.
Right.
You know, they don't actually have a good morality. The best antagonists are the ones who are, you know, there but for the grace of God go I. They are warped funhouse mirror reflections of the protagonist in a way. And they also have a philosophy that, while you may not agree with them, they've got a point that's consistent.
Right.
Like if you think of General Hummel from The Rock, right? Ed Harris's character is like the point he had. You know, all these guys who have died on
all these missions,
covert operations,
exactly,
and you, the government, just disavow. You don't take care of their families. That's wrong, and we're going to force you to do that.
Right.
Right. It's like I agree.
I agree with
that.
your point.
Not your methods, though. Yeah. Recently, Eric Killmonger in Black Panther is like, I may disagree with your methods, but you have got a point. You're right. Is the thing. What's motivating you is you're right.
Yeah.
And that realization, that doubt in oneself, is one of the most powerful things you can do in an antagonist. Is as long as the antagonist is this unabashedly evil,
right?
Everything you say is wrong. But when the antagonist starts to make sense, that creates the doubt in the hero. Am I actually the good guy in here? It's a perfect moment. And it also allows that the villain's defeat to be painful on the part of the protagonist, right? It costs you nothing emotionally to defeat a cartoonishly evil villain. It hurts you to kill a good person who's gone wrong, or a version of someone that you see so much of yourselves in, right? Look at how emotionally distraught T'Challa was at the end of Black Panther.
Yeah.
Look at how Luke, after his final duel and encounter with the Emperor and Vader, was, right? It's like the death of this villain has to traumatize the hero as well. Yeah. Turns them into a wiser, elder version of themselves at the end of their story.
I think, I think like one of the I think any villain or antagonist that changes the hero's perception of either themselves or the villain, also, or our, as the audience, like idea or perception of what they're really about, even. Yeah. Like if we're like, hey, you know, this is the cartoonishly evil villain, and then there's a reveal, it's like, oh, but I didn't know about your grandma that died when you were 4 and how that traumatized you to do X, Y, Z. So this isn't like a cartoonish thing for you. This is like you've got some psychological trauma that's leading you to do this thing. That tracks really consistently, and now I don't feel like you're just an asshole. I feel like you're a guy who, you know, or gal who can't deal with reality because of other things that happen to you.
A really great example of that is the end of Blade Runner. When, you know, in his last moment, Roy chooses mercy.
When they defy expectation of what the villain should do.
And you look at the situation there. He's killed a lot of people, but he was doing that trying to free his people from a prescribed death. Right. He just killed his god when he murders Tyrell. Right.
Because he couldn't get what he needed out of it. Yeah. And which is what he was after, like you were saying.
And what's so subversive about that film is that moment, that emotional crisis that ends Act 2. That's not Deckard's moment, it's Roy's, right? And ends with that beautiful Tears in the Rain speech, leaving Deckard wrecked in a way. Deckard lost that fight.
I read this is a tangent on that. I read a fascinating thing about that specifically shortly after the death of Rutger Hauer. And it was that large parts of that speech he improvised.
That's right. Yeah.
Specifically that part. And there was something about it where he was doing it to kind of get the goat of, I think, the director or someone. There was someone on there where he was like, I'm just going to do this to mess with this person, but also he thought it would be better. Like, it's... Look it up online, anyone listening, because I'm getting parts of it wrong. But it's a really fascinating little thing.
The best villains then. So to answer the question, Rom, the hallmarks of a good villain are exceeding the protagonist in everything so that they always are relegating them to the status of underdog, having a consistent morality that you may not agree with, but that you cannot ignore.
I think defying the expectations of what a villain is, I think, are also big for me. And I don't know that they have to exceed them in every way.
No, because they do need a weakness.
But I mean, there needs to be... They need to be threatening in every way, I think, is a different way to put it. Because, for example, like Joker Batman.
Yes.
Joker does not exceed Batman in tech, in being awesome, in being a fighter, in being anything. Mm-hmm. But what he does is he's so unpredictable that Batman can't figure out how to save people from the Joker. So the threat is Batman's failure to save people, Gotham, the city, and Joker is constantly threatening that. Like, Batman can beat up the Joker with no real effort. Like, he's going to beat the Joker in a contest of physical might.
Maybe we should amend that in that the villain must exceed... Well, it's more that the villain is better at choosing how to engage.
Yes.
And
that can
taking
easily
advantage of the weaknesses of the hero. And also, like, a simple way to put it is always, keep in mind, most villains don't believe they're villains.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Next question.
From Red, is there a main character that you have created that you would love to play regardless of gender or age?
I mean, I already get to play the best character we've ever created.
Mitch?
Dwammerthrax the Indestructible.
Oh, yeah, that one. I was like, Mitch, you get to lie around?
I get to lie around in my bathrobe.
In pizza boxes.
Pizza box. that was a bit of art imitating life there.
But this is asking for a main character.
There was a time where, yes, I wanted to play a character named Dane from a screenplay called Undergrads, which was our first foray into drama.
Yeah, I remember.
And but the thing is, I've outgrown that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not really. There's not a character I would want to play, a main character that I've created that I would love to play. I prefer being a bit farther from the performance.
The architect.
I like handing them off and letting someone else bring something much more to the role. Because part of that is because when I'm putting together a story or whatnot, every character is a piece of that story, regardless of their importance to the storyline. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking more for the connectivity between the characters and their function in the story. Mm-hmm. But then, give someone like Roderick to Nathan, and Nathan's only goal is to win as Roderick. Right? In the narrow, prescribed path that there exists in the narrative. And when you have every character piloted by someone entirely dedicated to that character, that is where one of the things that brings out the magic and all those wonderful improvised moments. Yeah. Because here's the thing. I know Roderick theoretically. Nathan knows Roderick practically. Nathan is there is no one better situated to reacting as Roderick than Nathan. And because of that, I as a writer would not be a good choice to play one of my own characters. If that makes sense.
It makes sense to me.
All right. Were you being Roderick right there?
Yes.
Okay.
No. I know the answer to this. From Every Door Repairman, lightning round questions. All right, here we go. Ready?
I guess.
Dog or cat?
Cat.
Dog. Netflix or YouTube?
Netflix.
Phone call or text?
Text.
Phone call. Breakfast or lunch?
Yes.
Brunch. Facebook or Twitter?
I'm trying to get off both.
Facebook. Mobile games or console PC games?
Console PC.
Ditto. iOS or Android?
iOS.
Android. Cake or pie?
Pie.
Cake. High tech or low tech?
Low tech.
Low tech. Big party or small gathering?
Small gathering.
Small gathering. Pancake or waffle?
Pass.
Controversial. Pancake. Coke or Pepsi?
Coffee.
Coke. While writing, pen, paper, or digital?
Depends on what stage you are in the story.
Excellent. I don't do enough writing. Online shopping or shopping in store?
In store.
Online, Mac or PC?
Mac.
PC. All right. There we go. Lightning round complete.
Okay.
From Brad McGowan.
I didn't realize you were wrong about so many things.
Yeah, that's funny. I was thinking the exact same thing. From Brad McGowan. Reminisce about first gamers film? Yeah, I do.
Often, quite, actually.
From Grelden. Why were you silly enough to start all this? What factors made it possible to actually write it all?
What?
Why were you silly enough to start all this?
Why were you silly
What
enough
factors make it possible to actually write it all?
Why was I silly enough to start all this? Why were we silly enough to start all this? We didn't date a lot in college.
Yeah. Or after.
Well,
that's
really?
Mainly because we were, in relationships by that point.
True.
But
why were we silly
Despite
enough
the
to start all this? I don't know any other way that it could have happened. I'd been writing silly sketches and movies and plays going back to middle school, and prose stuff back in 3rd and 4th grade for like young authors and that sort of thing. And I guess there's a point where it wasn't until college that I met other folk who were equally as unemployable and dedicated to crafts they couldn't pull off on their own. As for why does it keep going? What was the final bit of that?
what factors make it possible to actually write it all?
What factors make it possible to write it all? When it was in college, it was the fact that I was in college and I didn't have to work. Later on, it was having a supportive partner and spouse, or being in grad school. After that, it was I had enough experience that I knew that you could not just rely on inspiration,
Right.
and that the hobby had become a job. And to take it back to the beginning of this conversation, you got to get your words in. Like, if you're doing it as a hobby, and which was the other option. Like, I would have kept doing this as a hobby, and we would have had probably a slower release rate, where I wouldn't have been paid for it, and I would have done it when I felt like it,
Right.
when inspiration struck. But as it's a job now, you treat it like a job. You give it that respect, and you have to be protective of your own time too, which is difficult because, once again, now that we're in this new place and that I don't have, I'm not renting an office anymore. I work from home, and I have to make it clear more often to family than to friends that
Right.
you can't contact me during this stretch. This is my work stretch of time. If
It has to be reserved.
It must be reserved. This is how I make a living here.
Do you like me contributing to the rent or mortgage?
Yes, exactly. So that's what makes it possible now.
Okay. All right. From Thing. Do you have an atrocity pen for when writing certain scenes? Are you talking about shower scenes with Roderick?
No.
Because you need an atrocity pen for that.
I see. I use different colored inks depending on what I'm writing about. I also use a lot of highlighters when I might consider a highlighter an atrocity pen. It's got a big wedge shape to it that you hack through it. It's not precise at all.
And everyone can see what happened.
Exactly. So yes, I use highlighters quite a bit.
From Every Door Repairman. Have you considered streaming this podcast live on Twitch or YouTube?
Good Lord, no.
Yeah, no. We this one may not have as much editing, but we've had enough tech issues getting this going that we've had to restart or redo certain sections so many times.
Well, and partially, and this is one of the reasons why I wouldn't want to be an actor or moving away from that part of the profession, and why I prefer to stay behind the camera, is in the writing stuff, I can get it exactly right before it goes out.
Yeah.
And even here, there's a layer of separation. I can go, when I fire this up in GarageBand, I can tighten, I can edit, I can cut stuff out, and ultimately I can blow it up if need be. But if it's live, then it's out there.
And there's nothing you can do about it. Because you would all record it live instead of download it later.
I mean, there are times when, if I know the project is going to be live, you can mentally prepare for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Like doing the live stream show or Gamers Live or a panel or such like that.
But then especially stuff like that, the burden of continued action and content is spread among more than one or two people.
That's true.
That makes that a lot easier. Mm-hmm. And especially in things like a live stream of a gaming session. Like, at least the GM has a bunch of stuff prepared to make sure things keep happening.
Exactly.
So, whereas this is just more of a discussion with guiding questions. Mm-hmm. All right, so from Zamomin. JQ4 is supposed to be shot in spring. Mm-hmm. However, the story is set at the beginning of winter, and I presume that will figure into the plot because major spoiler. Will this discrepancy between the actual season and in-story season cause difficulties for the shoot?
Right. I'm not directing this season, so it's not my problem.
You heard it here, folks.
But
not his problem.
To be fair, I mean, yes, we're heading into winter. Lore-wise, most of this next season takes place in the Afterlands, but we're not going into any mountainous regions there. Mm-hmm. So we could get by probably with warmer cloaks or do some color correction to put some more blues into the light, make it look like it's darker and gloomier and colder there. There are ways that we can do that without actually saying, "Oh God, we need snow on the ground."
Yeah.
But one of the things I'm like, I understand the reason why it was necessary, but I was a little disappointed looking at season 3 as like, oh, we're at Pale Mountain. Pale, as in covered in snow, and it's all green. How exactly is this mountain pale? Oh, well, you can't have your cake and fuck it too.
Wait, what?
Anyway, thanks for listening to Coddiwomple. I'm Matt Vancil.
I'm Nathan Rice.
And I guess we'll talk at you again next time.
In the future.
All right.
And now...
Mars?
Bringer of pain.
War.
Oh, war. Right. War.